Well, happy Thursday, Ron. We're live.
Yeah, happy Thursday. Week before Christmas. Happy Thursday.
Yes, you have Elf on in the background, one of my favorite Christmas movies.
I thought it was better than CNBC.
They're both probably
I can
just as
watch
equally
it.
as distracting.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming in clear on my monitor too. It's great.
Yeah. Well, hey, welcome if you're joining us on any of our social channels. I'm Dave. My partner here is Ron, and together we are Little Nessie. And every Thursday we go live. Ron is probably the most studious people that I know, and he reads more than anyone I know, online, offline, whatever, and he puts a ton of work into coming up with topics that we think might be relevant to loan officers, housing professionals, any professional in the housing industry. And we've got about 8 topics that we're going to cover today. And he just puts a ton of work in there, and I just sit back and enjoy my Prosecco. So cheers to you, Ron. It's happy hour.
Cheers. I'm going with mimosa today. So cheers, everybody. McKenna, the producer.
Cheers
How
indeed.
about you?
I don't normally come in on this part. Hello there. I got myself
You can do cheers with us.
a banquet beer.
The king of beers.
Cheers.
All right.
Budweiser's the king of beers.
Well, let's go through our topics that we're going to cover today. Pretty excited about all of them, some more than others, but we're going to kick it off with do you have one in here, McKenna, about From the Gut? I'm not sure if you do or not. Yeah, so this one, I've got another From the Gut. From the Gut is where I just pick a topic that is trending, or it might be marketing, it might be branding. This one is titled Don't Be a Tool, and you might be surprised to see where it goes. I'm going to be talking about that in just about 3 minutes. But our first main topic, first of 3, we typically always do 3 main topics where we talk for about 7 or 8 minutes, and then about 4-ish rapid fire topics where we try to hit a 3-minute goal, but we usually go 5 or 6. So our first main topic is, I'm going to put the music back on.
Yeah.
Inflation is not going back up.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what should our inflation expectations be looking at historical data. And I think people will be surprised at what the historical norm is for inflation. So that'll be a good topic.
Next.
This is
big one
big
this
news.
Week.
Broke on last Friday night. Mike DelPrete reported that Google is entering the portal war. So we'll talk about that and some of the ramifications. We might even introduce UWM's purchase of Two Harbors into the conversation.
Next.
And then I really like this topic is looking at home ownership rates in the United States, and not only looking at what the data says, but what should they be and how could they be what we want them to be.
Yeah. And then we've got, I believe, 4 rapid fire topics, which we're bouncing around all over the place with those rapid fire topics, but they're going to be fun, we promise you. And then we'll end with our newish section, where it's all about giving you hints on AI prompting, and so on. But what do you say we start with From the Gut?
Let's go.
All right. So this week, there has been, I'm actually not sure how long it's been around for, but I just saw it this week. There's a video that went somewhat viral. Actually, it's a video of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and a ChatGPT user put it through Chat's image generator. They asked it to replicate the photo 101 times without changing anything. They said, just recreate, just replicate this image. No new angle, no outfit swap, no artistic style, just simply just do it again, just recreate it. What came back was eerie. Now, let's play the video, McKenna, and I'll continue. At first, the results look okay. Then you notice his facial structure starts to change. his tattoo on his chest starts to melt into his skin. His eyes start to get super creepy, and then it just goes off the rails. He's now got blue lips like you'd see on a clown, and he's starting to turn into a cartoon character, morphing into a drawing, and then it finally gets to some kind of weird art exhibit image. When it starts coming to a close, we're now getting something that you have no idea what you're looking at. It's as if it's as if you played a game of telephone with a million people where what you have at the end has zero resemblance to what you started with. And here's what struck me: 101 copies, and maybe only the first five or maybe six looked human or slightly believable. The rest were just absurd. And that's the trap. If you let AI do all of the work and you never inject your own thoughts, your own instincts, your voice, you'll end up becoming something that isn't you, not your style, not your tone, and over time, not even possibly even not even your core beliefs. It'll be a reflection of what the tool thinks you want, not who you actually are, and that matters, not just for content creators, not just for people who post every day, but for anyone in a relationship based business. Because whether you post or not, you still have a brand. Your clients and referral partners are forming impressions based on how you respond, how you post, how you follow through, and how you carry yourself when no one's watching. I touched on that a little bit last week. So when I see people shortcutting everything, feeding prompts into ChatGPT, spitting out content, adding maybe their own headshot and calling it branding, I worry. Because here's the thing, and here's the thing that I think about. You are not a template. Ron, you're not a template. I'm not a template. The more you rely on AI without shaping it, without thinking critically, without layering in your own experiences, the more generic you become. The more your content starts to the more your content will start to blend in with every other post that came from the same tool with the same prompts and in the same vibe. It's what you get when everyone copies and pastes the same prompt from the latest AI guru. When we're all familiar with them, when someone posts on social and says, use this prompt, it'll change your life. Even though Ron and I, we have AI prompt tips at the end of the show, Ron and I aren't telling you to simply copy and paste without analyzing if it's right for your business or your brand. I know I know people just want the easy button, but sometimes easy can be expensive, especially when it's your reputation. AI should be the assistant and not the voice. You don't let a you don't let a hammer design the house. You use it to build the vision you've already mapped out. And that's the mistake I see people making. They want content, but they don't want to be part of it. They want brand presence, but they don't want to show up. So they outsource it to a machine and wonder why it doesn't connect. The scariest part of all of this isn't what AI can do, it's what humans stop doing when they get too comfortable. If you let AI write for you long enough, you'll start to forget how to write yourself. If you let it think for you long enough, your critically your critical thinking starts to atrophy. And if you let it speak for you long enough, you'll wake up one day with a brand that doesn't feel like yours at all. Now, I say this all the time. I'm not anti AI. I even use it for these monologues that I do. I believe in it and I've built a business around it, but I never want to lose my voice to it, my brand. So use these tools, but don't let it use you, because 101 versions of something that's not real still isn't real. And that's what the world needs more of, especially in our industry. It's real connections, real value, real presence, and they all start with you. Ron, any thoughts?
Yeah, David, excuse me, that was awesome. The thing I would say, now watching this video a couple times, the aha for me or the key takeaway is you really have to police or oversee your AI tools because they deteriorate over time quickly. And so while they work perfectly, the one, two, three times, but once you get to the fourth, fifth, sixth generation, they're starting to deteriorate, they're starting to deviate, and they need to be policed and brought back on to the right message. And that's what that clearly showed. 101 iterations turned out something totally different. And it's the same thing with we give it a prompt to do writing or do it a prompt to do analysis or whatever it is. The initial start is pretty close to what we want once we shape it, but then it starts to slowly deviate until it looks like something totally different.
Yeah. Whoever thought Dwayne the Rock Johnson could turn into a weird modern art exhibit?
A little abstract art.
Yeah, abstract, not modern, but abstract. Yeah. So, and that's
Yeah.
to be honest, I mean, you and I use AI all the time, and we all know that the longer the thread goes, the more it starts to forget and more it just kind of takes on its own voice. You're like, no, that's not what I told you to do. And then that's what we mentioned about last week is how often do you curse at your AI? And it's usually when it's not trained properly or when it gets worn out. So that's exactly what that is. An example of it, at least.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our first of our three main topics. All right. Take it away, Ron.
Yeah, this is a really interesting. This came from Ben Carlson, and you guys know I'm a giant fan of Ben Carlson with Reinhold's Wealth. He is fantastic. He writes A Wealth of Common Sense, has also a podcast, a weekly podcast. In this one article he wrote about, he said, "Hey, look, everybody, inflation isn't going back." And McKenna, if we go to the next screen, you'll see what he means. Because what he says, what he shows here is that over the last, and I can't quite see how long that is, over the last 75 years, inflation has averaged 3.5%. And so we hear about the benchmark 2%. That's what the Fed wants is 2%. But historically, it's been at 3.5%. And in fact, if we go to the next slide and it shows you by decade, you'll see that in this decade, it's running a little hot. It's running at 4%. And so his point is, look, we're not going to achieve that 2% again, nor do we want to root for 2% because 2% would really take, a recession, would really take, the economy shrinking. It would take hardship. We may not get down to 2%. But then if we're going to live in a higher inflation world, if it's going to be 4%, 3% or 4%, I think now most, analysts are kind of targeting a 3%. But what comes with that is higher interest rates because you can't, I know I know we had a couple of decades of having low interest rates and moderate inflation, but you cannot have inflation cannot be higher than interest rates. You can't have a negative real interest rate. It's not healthy for an economy. And so this is just another a piece of evidence that probably interest rates are going to be higher for longer. But it was really interesting. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
I always look at the historical numbers and pull that back up for a second, McKenna, and what the causes are. And I'm looking back at the 70s. 70s was obviously the highest. What was the reason for that? You told me the other day, Ron. I guess was it something to do with Vietnam and but what was it?
Yeah, no, a lot of times inflation is really driven by the cost of energy. And we had gasoline shortages. We were rationing gasoline. We had overall energy shortages. And so that was the beginning that led to it. Then we had really poor governance, and we had a really undisciplined Fed, and that led just to a catastrophe that took a lot of medicine to fix. And that's what all Feds
Well,
live in the shadow of that catastrophe and don't want to experience it again. Um,
yeah. So
and
didn't
Dave,
the
it's
energy
interesting.
shortage? You go ahead.
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, wasn't the energy shortage, oil shortage, partly due to the conflicts that we were in? I
No, it
forget
had
what
to do
year,
more with
Vietnam.
Iran.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it had to do more with Iran and the oil embargo there and the hostages. That's what it had more to do with. But
Yeah.
Dave, what's interesting, and as we go to the next slide, is Americans abhor inflation. And if you see this slide right here, what you can see back as recently as 2021, inflation wasn't even really a concern with most Americans. And then, as inflation started to pick up radically in 2022 and onwards, by 2024, when it peaked, it was the number one issue by far about what Americans thought were their personal financial problems. 41% of Americans said inflation was my greatest financial problem I face. And even today, this year, it's almost a third. It's 29%. And that's a really important thing because how our whole view of our own financial health, of the economy, of our ability to do things like buy houses is really shaped largely around inflation. And inflation is a super interesting thing because, and Dave, you and I were talking about this earlier. Inflation is relative, as are interest rates, right? But if your income is increasing 10% a year, then you're not overly concerned about inflation increasing 3% a year. But if it's inverted, if prices are increasing 10% a year and your income's only increasing 3% a year, then you're super worried and you're very distraught because then you can't start to afford things. And that's become a big problem. And so we had some years where we weren't necessarily having wage gains greater than inflation. And that's certainly true, David, with housing, right? Because we saw radical, inflation and housing prices in this same time, this 2021 through 2025, and wages no way kept up with the housing inflation, and so housing became unaffordable. And of course, that will be remedied over time as house prices soften, maybe interest rates come down a little bit, but more importantly, as wages rise over time. And so it'll be a slow improvement, but we will fix that affordability.
Do you think if this survey went back 50 years, it would be mostly unchanged? I think so. There might be, I don't, maybe the high cost of living might not be the first one, but it'd be up there. But if it went back like 50 or maybe even more years, I think it would be mostly unchanged.
I think 70s and 80s would be a huge problem. And you know what, David, what's interesting is a lot of time an economist will look at inflation and go, well, gosh, it's only 3% this year. But it's 3% following 4%, following 5%, following 11%. So now the cost of what I'm buying is double. Even though inflation is only 3%, the cost of things are higher than my wages have gone. Think of cars, right? So, okay, cars may only be 4% more expensive this year, but they're 50% more expensive than 4 years ago, and my wages aren't 50% higher than 4 years ago. And that's how we feel it. And the government hasn't solved this problem right now. And they're going into a period where we're most likely going to have soft employment and we're going to have rising inflation, which is the definition of stagflation, which is the worst of all conditions in an economy. But hopefully hopefully we can do something to avoid that because that would certainly put hardship on Americans.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move on to our next one?
Yeah.
Or did we have one more slide on that one?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
We did
Let's move on to
we
topic.
did about it.
Okay. Topic number 2, home ownership rates, inches up.
David, I love this topic. And let's just go straight to the first chart. And here's what it shows. Shows the homeownership rate over time. And I can't see what's the early timeline is the 1990s. And what you can see
90.
is the homeownership rate right now over the last 35 years is pretty high. 65.3% historically is high. And if we actually went back decades, you'd see we're still at a pretty historic high. But a lot of times we compare that to the highs of the early 2000s. And here's the thing, David, this is what makes this such a good topic. In the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, 2004, the prevailing philosophy was that every American should be able to buy a home, right? And part of that, then we started giving loans to every American. It didn't matter whether you could qualify or not. It didn't matter what you did. Didn't matter whether you had, we could do no income, no assets, no employment, no down payment, and you could get a home. And then when we had the housing led recession, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, 2010, the prevailing philosophy changed to go. We went, maybe everybody shouldn't own a home. Maybe only people that can afford a home should own a home. And so that's kind of the prevailing philosophy today. And that has led us to 65.3% homeownership rate. And I would argue that is a really healthy rate in lieu of having more affordable housing. Because the way you're going to solve the affordability issue is to put a ton more supply on the low end of the scale. And in lieu of that, then we're probably at the right homeownership rate. And 65.3% isn't really a bad rate. Dave, I know we have a couple more slides on this, but do you have comment on that?
No, you said You made a comment that maybe not everyone should own a home, but any grown adult, they're either, if they're not living with their parents or with a buddy free of charge, they're either renting or owning. And we all know that the difference between those costs are, relatively the same. And a lot of people say that renting is more than the cost of home ownership, or at least your mortgage payment. Not if you factor everything else in, but is that a good argument that maybe not everyone should own their own home? Outside of fringe extremes.
Yeah, well, the thing I would approach it a little bit differently, David. You know, home ownership is the path to wealth for most Americans, for the far majority. You know, most Americans, 70% of Americans almost get all their wealth from the real estate, and so I like to see every American have the opportunity to enjoy that type of wealth creation. And to that end, I would hope that yes, home ownership is for everybody, but we just have to figure out how to make it affordable for everybody versus trying to shoo them into something they can't afford. And as you know, I think the most recent surveys show that homeowners' net worth is somewhere around $450,000. Depending on which survey you look at, and the average wealth of a renter is about $10,000. So
Right.
obviously, we want to help people own homes. Obviously, but that doesn't mean that we can do that irresponsibly, you know. And a lot of times when we want to engineer that outcome, we're engineering the wrong thing. For example, if we just do subsidies, if we just do rate cuts, you know, or we do down payment, we're not solving the affordability issue because we haven't solved the supply issue. We're just putting more demand on a constricted market, which will drive up prices, and we haven't figured out how to build inexpensive homes. And you know, it's hard when you start with like a base cost of 150 to $200,000 in taxes and permitting, you know, startup fees that really could be largely negated if we had a more more favorable environment. But it's hard if your base cost starts at $200,000 to build an affordable house. It's just really hard, and there's no incentive for a builder to do that because they have all the risks. They're going to want to get as high of return as they can, and that price home won't work. So I certainly hope we can solve it. Now, David, if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see the home ownership by age. And you know, I wish we had a historical chart, but I would argue this is probably pretty much what it's been like the last 4 decades. You know,
So
and
this is
it
comparing
hasn't changed a lot.
Q3 of 24 to 25.
Yeah, it's just year over year change, but I'd like to see
Yeah.
like decade over decade change, and I don't think it's really changed
Yeah.
radically. And the one thing though that we are seeing is homeownership rates for seniors used to start dropping about this time, especially we have so many senior citizens. Because it used to be that you know you bought a house, you raised your kid, maybe you moved up, you had a nicer house, your kids went to college, you hung out there until you're like 60, but then you're like, oh my gosh, my house is a little bit too big for me. I really need to downsize, or maybe I should go into a condo or assisted living or something. But today is what's happening, given that most of these seniors own their houses outright, and for whatever balance they have left on their mortgage, they're paying 3%. Their cheapest option is to stay in that giant house, even though they don't need it. And that's, you know, causing all sorts of problems for everyone. First, a lot of those seniors can't afford the upkeep and don't have the energy and wherewithal to do the upkeep, but also it's preventing, you know, move up buyers from being able to get their next home, which then isn't, you know, bringing entry level buyers opportunity to get into the market. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon going on right now.
All right. I've done this before, but I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna try and get you a crystal ball award win. Trump. You're gonna be the new Barry Habib. Um, Last
I
night,
would play that
Trump.
game if they invited me.
You would?
Yeah, if somebody invited me, I'd play that game. I think you have to have more credentials than I have.
I'd put money on you. I'd put money on you.
Oh
But
gosh, that's nice of you.
last night Trump announced in the beginning of January or the beginning of 2026, they're going to announce some kind of housing affordability overhaul. I want your predictions on what that's going to look like.
Well, you know, he's a developer, so he understands a lot of the problems. And the problem, he's going to have to do some sort of emergency powers act to supersede state and local, you know, authority over housing, permitting, um, planning, and that may not pass, you know, constitutional, a review. But that's what he's going to have to do. And the thing is, I think most people, both sides of the aisle, would like to see that. Now, obviously, local and state governments don't want to give up their sovereignty to the federal government, but something has to happen. And I think that's what he's going to try to do. There's quite a few other things he can do. He can also do all sorts of different national policies that start to restrict the type of building codes there could be on the uniform building codes. And then of course he can make public lands available. He can give grants or tax credits to people that build that lower cost housing. But the tax credits are a hard thing to work because if it's going to take you 15 years to build a house and it's bloated with all these expenses, a tax credit isn't going to get it done. And so it's going to have to be something super radical, but it's going to be something like that and he can do it through Emergency Powers Act. He can supersede local and state government authority to try to spur this on. And to me, that's one of the few things I think that he can do. He's also been rattling a trial ballooning about Fannie and Freddie getting into, loans for land development, which I don't necessarily agree with, but we'll see. The problem is you just can't solve it by affordability. You can't solve it by manipulating subsidies, for affordability and rate, and down payment. You have to do it by supply. And we have plenty of supply of houses in the United States. We just don't have plenty of supply of houses for, that entry level buyer, across the country. Say, how many houses are available at 150 or 200 or 250? Very little. But if you could build millions of them, that would really help affordability.
What would you say the average cost of a U.S. home should be for us to be in a affordable market? Right now, it's in the mid 400s.
Well, I just think we're missing, one tier. We're missing the entry level tier right now. We need to have a
Right.
really healthy entry level tier, and it depends on the state, David. In some states, maybe 225. So
Yeah.
that a young family can afford to buy a house, and it might only be like my parents, the market, they had like 1,200 square foot houses, 900 square foot houses, and they were cookie cutter. They were everywhere. After the Vietnam War, they just built them all over the place. We got to kind of go back to that, build all these entry level small houses that a family can get their foot in the door. And you need to build a ton of them. And I think that would solve it because some states that have higher earnings might be, 250, 300, but you need millions of those homes. Now, one of the problems, David, I know you and I have talked about this. One of the things so there's $37 trillion in equity in the United States right now, 37 trillion, depending on, the day and how houses are appreciating. And the way that we created that, that wealth in America is through scarcity. The fact that there isn't enough supply has driven up the prices of houses. So the challenge is if you just flood the market with a ton of supply to solve that problem, you're going to devalue that asset. You're going to bring prices down. And when I did exhaustive research with both ChatGPT and with Perplexity, going, if we built X amount of houses, how would that affect current values? And through a lot of different research prongs, the conclusion was that if we actually built, if we could just wave a magic wand and build 4 million low price houses next year, it would drop the price of the housing market by about 15%. And so you see 15% of the national, wealth deteriorate in 12 months. Now, we can't build that many houses in a year, so we don't have to worry about it. But there's another side of the equation to also pay attention to, because when people say, gosh, we really need affordable housing, I always want the next question, well, if affordable housing dropped the value of your house by 20%, are you voting for that? And my
Right.
guess is we might have a different opinion about then if that was going to happen. So you have to do it kind of in a regimented way.
Yeah. We're over on time on this one, but I've actually got a question for McKenna. Because when we
And
talk
David, I also
about
want to make sure we get the last. David, I also want to make sure we get the last screen too. So ask McKenna, and then let's peek the next screen, which is housing information.
Yep. You said that we need to get back to the 1970s or whenever when we had 1,200 square foot homes. In McKenna, for reference, your grandmother, her apartment is about 800 square feet. So imagine 800 square feet compared to 1,200 or so. What do you think Gen Z, their perception or the likelihood is that Gen Z, people who have never owned a home, would be excited about buying a 1,200 square foot house?
She threw a lot of numbers at me. So 1,200 was the average then, or 800?
It's actually
Ron
below
said we need to
1,000
get
square feet.
Okay, yeah. So Ron
Wait,
said to solve the affordability issue, we need to get back to where families move into 1,000 square foot homes or 1,200
I see,
square
I
foot
see, I
homes.
see.
And for reference, your grandmother's apartment is
I got
about
it.
880 square feet.
I personally, like, speaking for myself, I would love to live in a small home. I don't want like a big house or anything like that. Now, granted, I haven't owned a home, but there is something to me that just seems so perfect about that. Like, I don't need any grandiosity or extra bells and whistles or anything like that to be happy. I just want a nice, quaint home where I can, live my life. I on the areas of the internet that I'm on, I would say that it would be the same. However, I also that's just what's catered to me in my algorithm. So I don't know if I can speak for all of Gen Z, but I would say from me personally and from a lot of people in the areas of the internet that I'm in would agree.
The dark web.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but having your own little plot of land, your own house, it's a great way to start it. As you start to have kids, you go up in scale, but you've also gained some appreciation and some assets, and now you can afford the bigger house. We need to figure out how to solve that. And
Yeah.
David, that
All
also
right,
might
let's
be
get
solved too by a 3D printing, by certainly the huge strides they're making in manufactured
mhm.
homes. Today they can build a nicer house in a factory than they can on a lot of land, and that solves kind of some of the labor restrictions that we have or constraints that we have. You can buy materials in bulk. You can control a lot of things. You can really raise the quality and bring down the price. And so there's going to be some other solutions that come forward as well as government solutions.
Yeah. Let's get to that last slide of this one, then we'll move on.
Yeah. So the next slide, just real quickly, this is a slide showing housing formation. The blue is owner occupied homes. The red is rent occupied. You can see that how the trend is. We were really trending well in the early 2000s of people trying to get to home ownership. Of course, it spiked. It spiked a couple times, but we've dropped the last few quarters. The good news is the trend is that the home ownership rate is starting to grow, and you can see now the rent occupied housing formations is starting to retreat. So the trends, if you looked at it, are positive. But part of the whole thing too is just we're having far fewer housing formations than we expected. And if you guys are fans of Barry Beeb, and I certainly am, and more MBS Highway, Barry has been for I think 3 years, talking about, hey, you usually start to create housing formation at around 33, 34. Given the birth rates, we are right now coming to the sweet spot of housing formations, and so this should be banner years. And he has a great presentation on that, whether you see him live or whether you watch one of his videos. And what happened, that didn't happen because what we didn't take into account is that new families can opt not to launch, right? Kids that come back from college can go live with their parents and not buy a house or not rent an apartment. Or kids that come of age can delay moving out, or grandma can move back in. All these things can happen. And so, what we saw is, and what these charts show, is that we just have anemic housing formation because of not so much of the financial conditions, but because of the vibes that homeowners and renters have, and they just haven't felt confident creating new housing formations. And I think that's going to turn too. I think we'll start to see that pent up demand come into the market, which will really help if you're in real estate or mortgage.
I'm ready to talk about Google versus Zillow.
Me too.
All right. There's a boxing match coming up. There's a big boxing match tomorrow. Jake Paul and Anthony, forget his name. Do you know about that, Ron?
Yeah, the professional fighter against the influencer.
Yes, that's happening tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, live. Big boxing match, just like Google versus Zillow. Big boxing match coming up. Frame it out for us.
This is really interesting. On Friday night, I want to say like 5 o'clock, Mike Del Prete, and Mike Del Prete is kind of like the whole guru over, like if you're looking at like a radar screen for real estate, like Mike's sitting at that table watching that screen, so he kind of sees what's coming up and he reports really well and he has great data. And so he came out a report out of cycle for him about how Google is now starting to enter the portal wars. And he gave a bunch. I gave, and all he had is he had like 4 screenshots. He's like, "Hey, look, in certain markets, Google is now partnering." I forget, Dave. Do you remember who the company they're partnering with? It's I don't remember
I
off
don't.
that, but with a real estate company, and they're now providing search in their website. Now they've tried this before. They've tried to come into real estate before, as well as mortgage, and they haven't succeeded. But whenever they come in, you have to worry because they're such a juggernaut. They're so huge, And so this was reported Friday. Housing Wire, Inman picked it up on Monday and Tuesday. Mainstream newspapers picked it up on Tuesday. I think Zillow's stock dropped 8% when it was widely reported. Just really interesting. And because the thing is, if Google, and I did a LinkedIn post. I think I did this. I think it's my post tomorrow. But we're all worried about that monster hiding in the closet, the one that's going to come and just attack us. And since I've been in the business for over 20 years, we've been worried. Oh my gosh, Amazon or Google or Apple, some of those massive tech companies are going to come in, and they already have direct relationships with consumers. They control eyeballs. They have unlimited money. They have unlimited advertising budgets. They have unbelievable technology, and could they come in and just all of a sudden just steal our business? And so we're all worried about this. If Google figured out how to capture eyeballs and monetize it in real estate, they would do it. And so that's what the news is. And while it's not, gosh, we got to start running from the monster. It's just, hey, we got to keep our eyes open and pay attention to what's happening. But what it really tells you, whether it's Google or whether it's the Rocket, juggernaut, or even the growing United Wholesale Mortgage growing juggernaut with another purchase with Two Harbors, or with New Res and the PE firm that just bought them. The fact is, everybody is trying to figure out how to get to your customers. Everyone. And if you're not intentional, if you're not terrific in serving your customers and putting your arms around your customers, these companies are going to figure out how to get them. They're like abalone hunters. They're going to scrape that abalone off the rock that is your business and take it from you. And so the thing that we just keep getting smacked in the face with every week for this last couple of years is that we have to cherish our database. We have to serve it. We have to be excellent because everybody's coming to steal them. And if we want to maintain them, and I know I want to maintain them because most of those people love you, appreciate the work you did for them. Well, you can't take advantage of them. You can't take them for granted. You got to just absolutely serve them. And if you do, then you can outposition the Googles or the Amazons or whoever's coming to steal your, whatever monster from the bed's coming.
There was chatter, gosh, probably 10-ish years ago of Amazon wanting to buy a mortgage company. I think Loan Depot was one of the companies that was kind of rumored for that. And obviously that never happened. Do you think Google has some kind of ulterior motive here as well, or it's just a search, monetizing the search of that?
Well, you got to be, careful with all these giant tech companies because they have all sorts of auxiliary planks that have nothing to do with their core business. Like if you think Amazon, they have AWS. That really doesn't have anything to do with retail shopping.
Right.
They own the Washington Post essentially through Bezos. They have Blue Origins. I mean, they have all sorts of businesses that really have nothing to do with the business they have, right? And so you never know when they want to get into a new business. So that's a scary thing. But then here's what we learned because these companies, if they could monetize it and figure out, they'd be in it. But one, mortgage, real estate is complicated. It is super hard. There are so many moving parts. There's so many details. And I know that technology is starting to tame that lion, but it's still very, very complicated. And not only is it complicated, it's capital intensive, and and it has high risk with low margins. So today the margins aren't super fat on a mortgage, and margins aren't fat in real estate offices, right? And so you have a low margin product that has a huge capital expense, that is highly technical, that has a very huge human cost to it. It's a very tricky market for somebody like Amazon or Google to want to get into. It's not that easy. And it takes somebody like Rocket to kind of figure out that puzzle of how do we manage all that complication, how do we manage the human part and the technology part, how do we maximize our return on every dollar. And I don't know if some company that does it just tangentially can do it. honestly. And so I don't know if it will work here, but it's getting closer because as technology grows and takes more and more of the whole experience pie. Like where it used to be, technology was only like a fraction of what your customer experienced. Today, it might be 60%. Well, at some point, there's a tipping point when then the technology companies will come, not only technology companies, but also asset rich companies, right? They'll come in and go, okay, we're going to go ahead and just take the cream of the crop right now. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to make up a little bit of time here because we went double the length on the last one. But speaking of Amazon, our first rapid fire topic is all about Amazon and facial recognition and the end of the world and the Minority Report movie that came out with Tom Cruise 15, 17 years ago. What's this one about, Ron?
So this is really interesting, and this is really a follow up. And Dave, we covered this. I want to say a month ago, maybe, or 6 weeks ago, on a podcast. And what had happened, Amazon had sold access to its Ring cameras to a very large tech provider to police services. And I can't remember the name of the company. It was like Fletch or something like that, or Flock. And so Amazon sold access so that that company could then get access to every single Ring camera in America, and then they sold that access and they used AI and all sorts of stuff to police departments and different state and federal police agencies. And that was kind of a weird thing because you and I talked about it in a minute. Did you think that when you put a Ring camera in, that the police, the FBI, the whoever, ICE, anybody could have access to that video, which is kind of creeps you out, right? And now what they're doing, which is the next step, is they now created technology so they can do facial recognition through your Ring camera, and they want you to approve it. You approve facial recognition, which who knows, maybe they're already doing, like, we don't know, right? But how you participate is you identify the person. So Dave, if I come to your house and the Ring camera goes somebody at the front door, you go, oh, that's Ron. And then you fill in my information, who Ron is. And now every time I come to the front door, it'll go, hey, Dave, Ron's at your front door. And you might go, I'm going to put an auto response like, hey, Ron, just come right in, the keys under the mat or whatever it is. So you're going to create, a customized, not journey, but, a customized welcome for me, because now the Ring recognizes me and it's going to participate with you in how to manage your guests at your door. But the thing is, it's already selling all that information to someone else. And so what extent does that start to really, invade our privacy? And the big question is, are they using all these images, all this information in their AI training? And so so if you're, if you're a skeptic, and if you believe, if you just fear technology, and then you see this as a super evil thing versus, hey, isn't that nice? I can just greet my mom with a warm personal welcome when she comes to my door.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I love the sound of it. I love tech. I love the idea of being able to personalize my messages when someone walks up to my front door, or if it's an unknown face. You can, if it's you that walks up, Ron, yet like you said, hey, Ron, come on in, the keys under the mat, whatever. But if it's an unknown face, you program it to say, who the hell are you? Get off my property and whatever. But if you're a super skeptic, then you've got there are probably plenty of people that have seen Minority Report, where you're walking down the street and there's facial recognition everywhere, and then you see customized advertising to you, and that's fine. But then you've also got, if we ever get into the days of 1984 with thought crime and all that kind of stuff, then you can't go anywhere without being tracked. They'll learn not only who comes to your door, and who shows up at your house, but they also learn your habits and your kind
Yeah.
of rhythm of life and how often you leave the house and how long you're gone for. And there'll be all kinds of dangers in that, in the government or whoever, private companies having that information and what they do with it.
Yeah, David, it's kind of in the same page of getting your DNA, analyzed, where
Yeah.
you want to learn your ancestry, but little did you know that they were giving that information to the police, so that if you're actually a criminal, I mean, it's just the unforeseen consequences are unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's move on. These are rapid fire. Let's keep them rapid fire. Our next is all about subscriptions and how your subscriptions are holding you captive.
Yeah, this is a Wall Street Journal article, and it was a really interesting article. Now, it talked about all subscriptions of every type, but and we can go to the next slide on this. But here was the bottom line: on average, the average American has 4 streaming subscriptions that average $70 a month, with younger people having more expense and older people having less expense. And it's one of those things when we start talking about, gosh, can you afford a home? A lot of times it's not the home that costs so much money, it's your cost of living on everything else. It's the cost of spending $100 a month to watch, TV, or the cost of spending $15 a day for Uber Eats, or the cost of $5 a day at Starbucks. It's what our standard of living is today is really expensive, and sometimes precludes being able to then afford a home, and we don't have the discipline or the budget skills to figure out where we need to make choices. And this is certainly one of them. And I know I'm the most guilty. I probably, David, I'm not being facetious when I say this. I probably have well over 100 subscriptions to stuff, and I probably don't even know what 20 of them are. And I know there's financial services, like, by the way, like Rockets Finance, that will tell you who you're subscribing to and help you navigate that. And I Figure and a bunch of other ones do too. But this is a hidden expense that people don't know. And the first thing is you just got to audit it, or you got to get one of those services to audit it for you.
Yeah, Rockets is free, isn't it?
Rockets is free, and then, that's the second most popular financial app in America.
Is it really? I knew it was
Mhm.
popular. I
Five
didn't know it
five
was
million
that popular.
subscribers. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I think I'm actually going to subscribe to it.
yeah.
But when you think about it, you said the average citizen has 4 streaming services, and
Yep.
they pay an average of $70 a month on those streaming services. I got to
Mhm.
imagine that most people that fall into that category probably don't have cable TV anymore, which cable TV used to cost, well, when you bundle it with phone and internet, it was in the $200 to $250 range. So if you just strip out cable, which I just have internet, so that's like 50 or $70 a month. Um, does that not balance out? Because we've talked about this several times, how much younger generations, or really every generation, how much they're spending on lifestyle compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But if you compare it to 15 to 20 years ago, no, very few people have cable anymore, which was expensive, and they're paying for the streaming services, and they're also paying for Amazon, but they're also saving gas money from having to go to the mall every weekend and to the grocery store and all of that. I wonder how much it actually balances out when you take those variables into account.
Yeah, Dave, I cut the cord, my cable cord, 10 years ago, and, I went 5 years where I loved having my antenna, for over the air, waves, which was the
Yep.
funnest thing in the whole world. I wish I could do it again. And then I went DirecTV, and then from there I went to YouTube TV. But I think that even if you have subscription services, most people still have something like YouTube TV or Fubo or something like that. And I think too that number that we are using, that for streaming services at $70, is looking backwards, because we've seen radical cost increases in the core services as well as
Yeah.
bundling, which is leading to more costs. I think that number is actually artificially low. I think it's a lot higher today.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so who knows? I mean, is it worth it? Probably. Is it cheaper than we used to get, just totally ripped off by just straight cable? Probably. But I will tell you, in case you guys don't know this, man, you can get free over the air airwaves, and it's digital by law. It's a digital signal. And so when I lived in San Diego and I had a really inexpensive antenna in my house, I could literally get 70 stations from LA, San Diego, even Tijuana. And so and it was free. It was great, you know? And so if you're trying to save money, think of that.
You wanna know what I think of, antenna content, TV, and so on?
Yeah. Well, you get ABC, NBC, CBS. Another thing is a lot of the, like, generic, kinda like, cable people, like TNT, TBS, they all broadcast over the air. I mean, USA, I mean, it's not the top quality, but you can get a lot. PBS, it's not that bad. There's some,
Yeah.
Nature Channel.
I'm fully on the on-demand, uh, cycle that I couldn't go back to whether it's free or not, just kind of being happy with what's playing at 8 PM, 10 PM, and you don't have any choices other than a handful of channels.
Yeah. See, the best thing I've ever watched is free.
Oh, whatever. You can afford to watch whatever you want to watch. All right, let's talk about some adulting. And we kind of put this image on here just for shock factor. But what's this all about, Ron?
Yeah, and I know McKenna's going to join us on this because we had a healthy conversation. We were doing a little show prep, but I had to first, David. I had to look up what the heck adulting meant because I might
Really?
not have a full grasp of it, and so just to see we're all on the same page. Adulting means doing the kinds of tasks and taking the responsibilities that are expected of a grown, responsible person. Okay, that's adulting. Oh wow! And so we there was an interesting article this week um, from Bloomberg called "The Adulting Tax," and what it said is that people today are willing to pay more to try to avoid some of the adult responsibilities. And this is super important to think about if you're a service provider. The truth is, yes, affordability is constrained. Yes, people are having to make choices with their money. But the fact is, consumers will pay more if you give them more, especially more of their own time back. And that's what's really important. And in the article, which David, I know you and I still don't quite understand, but one of the greatest frustrations that people, adults have, is having to move their laundry from the washing machine to the dryer. Like overwhelming, for kids to have to do that. And so there's been a search of a, machine that does it both. You just put it in and it washes it and it dries it. And so they've been developing these machines over the last couple of decades, and they really kind of perfected them here the last few years, and they can't keep them in stock. Like GE was going to make their first run, and they're going to make like 10,000 machines, and they sold them like a week. And they're like, oh my gosh! And to put it into perspective, if you buy a washer and dryer, let's say the combo costs about $1,500. The combo on the one and all is like $2,200, but people don't care. And it's people that are on a budget. They don't care. They're like, if it saves me 10 minutes of my own time, fine, great, let me do it. And I think we have a couple charts on this, McKenna.
McKenna actually just
And,
spent the
and
last 2 days laundry, so she might have. You and you told me about the combo unit that both washes your clothes and dries your clothes. I don't think McKenna knows about that one. She might have some thoughts on that now that she spent the last 2 full days doing laundry.
I think in Japan they have units that will wash, dry, and fold. But what this shows right here, this shows how many companies mention the word choiceful when talking about their consumers in their quarterly reports, and that they're starting to, craft their product to give consumers choices over time versus money. And so that's what this chart right here is showing. And then the next chart just shows the growing the growing desire of people to spend more money. They'd rather have more time than more money, and that's a changing thing, and it's a really big thing. And McKenna, I'm so curious. If you're representing the young people, what's your view on this?
It was one day, by the way. It was just one
Well,
day of
because
doing laundry.
McKenna, if you put all your clothes, all the clothes you own in a stack, it'd probably be one load of clothes. I mean, holy smokes!
I think I went about 2 weeks without doing it because it got away from me. And I spent the full day doing laundry. Now, that laundry machine that you mentioned that can fold and put away, that I would invest as much money in my bank account as I had. All of it. Give me,
I
I'll
don't
pay
think he said put
everything.
away. I
Well,
don't think he said
It's
put
that's,
coming.
away.
It's coming in the form of robots. They're already there. They're just perfected them. So it's super close.
give me the Tesla bot. Put away my clothes. I
Yeah,
don't want to do it.
yeah, yeah. You could have the separate laundry, separate washing machine and dryer, but you could just have the Tesla robot start it for you, dump it in there for you, take it out, fold it, and so on. So instead of getting the all-in-one laundry or washing and dryer, just get a Tesla bot, Optimus.
There
Exactly.
you go. I think the bigger point though here is really trying to convince, say real estate agents and loan officers, your customers will pay for your services if you're giving value and giving them time back with confidence, right? um, and they'll make that choice, but you have to clearly paint that. You know, hire me so that you don't have to spend the next 10 weeks looking for a house. I'll find the right house for you and bring it to you, right? Hire me so you don't have to become an expert in mortgages. I'll find the best mortgage for you, educate you, make you confident, save you time, right? That we have to start to kind of approach it with that kind of pitch.
Yeah.
Agreed. Loan officer is not going to find the house for you, Ron, though. So you're going to
No,
have a
but you know what?
compliance.
So David, when I was a little pup, when I was a pup getting into the business, who my core client was? I was really specialized. I helped self-employed, fairly wealthy business owners, and by the way, they were referred to me by the private banker or their investment person. My core referral partner was a bank. I had a top 1% financial planner referring me stuff, and it went like this: just do whatever they said. Like, I'm busier than hell. I'm running a big company, and my clients had pretty good sized companies. They're like, I don't want to be an expert in mortgage. I don't want to deal with mortgages. Just do what my banker said. Do what my investment person said, and don't bug me. Just make it as easy as possible. That's all they cared. And I didn't. I was not discounting my fees, by the way. And by the way, I rarely talked about interest rates with my clients. They didn't care. They didn't care. They're like, just take this burden off of me so that I can do what I'm doing, which is building big companies.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you're a CEO, owner of a company, you don't care about 4.5 of over 4.7%. But when you're, when you're someone that is not well off and looking to buy a $225,000 home, you do care about 4.6 over 4.75 or whatever it is.
But maybe not. Maybe that person, has a bunch of kids and can't figure out how to get them to little league and can't figure out how to manage everything. And what they really like is somebody to take care of them, take care of it with giving them confidence, right? So that they can have that time back. Even it does come with them, as Dina Yoko, even if it did come with a little bit of a hickey, a little bit of a cost. But you have to convince
Yeah.
them that that cost is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get to our last of our rapid fires and let's talk about the Benjamins.
The Benjamins. All right, let's go. You know what? So this is an interesting article. What it had to do is how far does $100 go in every state? So that's what this is talking about. It, and it's really surprising. I think we're going to get to the chart next because you'll kind of see. And I know this chart is hard to see, but you'll see that the dollar goes the furthest in Oklahoma. Like, you get, I think it was $119 worth of stuff for $100 in Oklahoma. So let's just pretend you're going to go to Walmart or Costco. So you go to Costco and get toilet paper. If you buy that toilet paper in California, you're going to get $87 worth. But if you go to Oklahoma to buy it, you're going to get $119 worth of toilet paper. And so the money isn't constant across all states; it's relative. And so this shows you the buying power of every state. Now, what it doesn't show you is, because prices are relative, just like interest rates are relative, and they're relative to income. So if if you have more income, you don't care if stuff costs more. But what was interesting, the higher income states had lower dollar value. And so all the increases you had in your income was eaten up by low dollar value, which is really true. California is one of the most expensive states to live in, and yet it's not offset by high enough wages. And so the affordability, and that's what happens. You go, cost, minus wages equals affordability, or divided by wages equals affordability. The affordability in these states that have a very low, value of $100 or a dollar, is usually the affordability is just crappy.
I get $8 more of groceries than you do every month, Ron.
No, no doubt. If I was in California, you'd probably get twice as many groceries. It's so, even Dave, when I go from here in Scottsdale to San Diego, you can already just tack on 20% to everything. I mean, just everything. And for gas, you could tack on 50%. It's crazy how different it is.
Do you feel the tangible difference when you're between Arizona and California? You're like, damn, I just spent this much on gas versus back in Arizona.
100%. David,
Yeah.
I'm a pretty, I like cooking, and I really kind of, like the ingredients I get, and so I'm very aware how much they cost. And so let's say, like, if ribeye steak, choice ribeye steak is on sale here for $5.99 a pound. It's on sale in San Diego for $8.99 a pound. You're like, what in the world?
Gee. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know salaries are typically higher uh, in California than maybe other places, but not to the amount where they offset the cost of living as much as they should, or as much as what people would like them to, right?
Yeah, that's because there's a lot of factors in that, David. And if you're in San Diego, where I was born and raised, that's a desirous place to live. And so you don't have to entice people with as much money because they get to live in San Diego, right?
Right.
If you're, no offense to anybody, but let's say you're in, I don't know, some desert in Nevada, probably not as desirous to live. You got to pay him more money, even if the cost of living is low. You still got to pay him more money, and so there is that benefit in really popular states that they don't have to pay as much because it's in high demand.
Right. McKenna just made a note of the highest. There's two though. Arkansas and Mississippi, both $113. That looks like the highest.
Yeah, I thought it was
California
Oklahoma
is
actually.
definitely Oklahoma's
Oklahoma's.
112.
Um,
Arkansas and Mississippi are 113.
yeah, interesting. Hey, Dave, this is totally off topic. I read an article. I don't know if I mentioned this. I read an article that said the price of ground beef will average over $10 a pound by the end of Q2 next year.
You told me that earlier, and I don't do the grocery shopping or the routine grocery shopping. I was like, how much? How much is it right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think over the last few years, it's been somewhere around $3.99, maybe on sale $2.99 a pound. Cross country. Right now, it's sitting around
Right.
$5.99 a pound across country. Get on sale for $3.99 occasionally. Over $10
Hmm.
will freak America. It's a popular food type. It will freak Americans out.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to our final section where we give an AI tip or AI prompt tip of the week.
Yeah, this is great. And Dave, this has been such. See, I remember that was coming. This has been such a fun section to talk about, and we usually have 5 or 6 different tips on how to deal with AI. And this week we picked a really good article. Do we have the kind of a snapshot of the article, a screenshot of the article, McKenna? Oh no, we just had the prompt rules. So this comes from an article from Jimmy Burris in Inman News, and he's a phenomenal writer. I don't know how he writes so much good content. And he said there's 7 ways you need to use AI, and then he describes the 7 ways. And not only does he describe how to use it, he then goes on and says, "Here's the best practices to get the most you can out of your AI tool." And so the one I think we're highlighting is how to become the real estate agent that AI recommends. So how do you achieve that AEO or GEO? And he goes through here's the prompt that you give to your AI tool to help teach you how to you raise your AEO or GEO. And then it gives you further best practices of what to do to even improve that. This wasn't actually my favorite one of the prompts. He also had business planning. He had how to build long-term relationships with your past clients. Another one was how to generate as much business as you can from your sphere of influence in 30 days. There's all 7 of them were really, really good. This is just one of them. And what I really liked, like I said, he would give you the prompt and he'd give you like nuance below it. And they were very, very actionable.
Yeah, and there's one more slide I think in here, right? Yeah. But as I said
Yeah.
in my from the gut section, we're gonna give you all these tips, tricks for prompts. Don't take them and just like I said, it shouldn't be a copy paste culture. It should be take this and learn from it and turn it into your own.
David, you bring up such a good point because I mean, I think even in a bigger sense, if all you're doing is cutting and pasting from your AI tool, then you're not using your AI tool right. Because all of these things that Jimmy is suggesting is how to use AI as an advisor. It's not to do stuff for you; it's to train you. And so that's different than going, "Hey, AI, act as me then iterate a million times on what you think I am. Instead, you're saying, "Hey, AI, I want to be better. Teach me to be better. Teach me all you know." And that's totally different, you know. And to
Right.
the point is, David, that one of the things that is one of the biggest gaps that I think or opportunities that people have in the AI world is that they're not asking AI to help train it, to help them to educate and train themselves to make them better. We got, you know, as we've talked about before, stop telling AI what to do and start asking AI what you should do. And you're gonna have a whole lot more, you know, progress than the other way around.
Yep. Agreed. Alrighty. Well, next week we have even more topics to choose from. Ron, you've already started doing your research. Ron puts an entire week of research into the prompts, or not the prompts, the topics that we want to talk about. What might be the most entertaining? What might be the most educational, and so on. So this was a good week, Ron. What was your favorite topic this week?
Um, it's hard because I gotta do several rants, you know, and so those are all good.
I'm looking
I
forward.
always like this
I
one.
kind of want. I kind of want to bring back Ron's rant where it goes on a true rant because I enjoyed those.
And then David, we're going live next week on Tuesday out of respect for Christmas, you know, and so we're doing Tuesday.
Out of
Not to mention
respect
my in-laws.
of Christmas,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
the
because my
fact that
in-laws
we
will
just don't.
understand.
Yeah.
No,
Go.
David, it's because I don't know if my in-laws will understand me doing happy hour at noon, you know, on Thursday. So I got to get it before they. I got to do it before they get here.
Understood. I think we're gonna have a guest next week. Last week we had Kristen Messerly of First Home IQ. We're gonna have a guest maybe next week or the week after, but we're gonna try and bring on a guest probably at least every 2 weeks or so. We really enjoyed having Kristen. She shared some great insights from the amazing organization that she co-runs with Todd Bookspan, Dave Savage, First Home IQ. So yeah, looking forward to that. And with that, Ron, cheers.
Cheers, cheers,
If we don't
McKenna.
see
Good
our
job.
audience,
Cheers to you.
if we don't see our audience next week because it's Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays. All right, that's a wrap.